Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. It's Hair to Stay by Miss E. I'm going to be showing you how I created this wig on the sewing machine. As you see here, I have my 3 bundles of hair. I have a 10-inch, a 12-inch, and a 14-inch, and a 10-inch closure. At this point, I am taking my hair together and I'm folding them together and I'm doubling my tracks. And I'm going to do a zigzag stitch on the sewing machine. Make sure that when you start stitching that you do a back stitch when you start and also when you end. You may not see me do this process throughout the video because normally I don't do a lot of back stitching when I'm doing a video just for YouTube. However, if you are going to wear this wig or you're making it for a client, make sure that you back stitch every time that you either add a track on to your wig or when you are double stitching your tracks. Now this process you can do anytime during the process of making your wig. I did bleach my knots. I use a 40 volume developer with the BW2 bleach, and I'm turning it upside down so that I don't get any red roots or my hair doesn't get discolored, because the bleach tends to swell when you have it upside down. And right here I am basically just putting my closure onto the cap, and I'm preparing for the measuring or markings of that space. And I'm taking my T-pins to secure it. You want to make sure that your closure is a ½ inch or maybe a quarter of an inch past the cap line in the front. This is going to assure a closure that's going to lay nice and smooth. And it's also going to make sure that you can have enough lace exposed so that you have that natural looking hairline. I'm going to be using white chalk today. I decided that I wanted to try something different. I like chalk because chalk does not leave any permanent markings when you are done. I just don't like that look when that permanent metallic marker leaves marks on the inside of my wig. You can basically experiment with any type of tools or markers. I have several that I'm going to be experimenting with throughout my videos, and I will let you know how I like them. And make sure you leave a comment below if you have any suggestions. But the chalk is going to basically disappear by the time you reach the top of the cap, which works perfectly for me because it's not going to leave any permanent markings inside of my wig cap. So here's the space that's allotted for my closure. I'm going to sew that on at the very end. And right here, I'm going to start making my markings to sew the tracks on. I'm going to space them about 1 inch apart. This is not my normal process, but I decided to try it this time. But I found out that as I moved up higher on the head when I was sewing, that I needed to sew in between the tracks because 1 inch spacings were just a little bit too wide. I ran out of cap space and I needed to make them smaller. So I did sew in between some of the lines, and I also use single tracks as I got up towards the crown area. So you're basically going to have to learn how to improvise. I would suggest not to basically copy or mimic any one person's style. Just make it your own, do what works for you. And as you see here, I'm erasing because I cannot make a straight line to save my life. However, I'm so glad that this chalk was so easy to just to erase and dust off. And so I was able to basically readjust my lines. I did do measurements. My measurements are 22-inch circumference and 14-inch from front to back. If you watch my other video on wig making on the sewing machine, you will see how I measured. I basically right here want to make sure that my sides are equally the same. You want to make sure you have the same amount of spacings on each side of the head so that you'll have an equal amount of hair on each side of the head. And I'm making this very important mark right here. This is going to be the last track. I'm making that mark that's going to go completely around the part where the closure is going to be. That is going to make sure that you don't see any tracks behind the closure. The closures sometimes are not really thick enough to hide the other tracks, but that hair that you're going to put directly behind it will secure that you won't be able to see the tracks from the other hairs. And as I was saying about the measurements, you really can't really get a very specific custom when you're making measurements. That's the reason why I only do circumference and front to back, because these wig caps only come in 3 different sizes: small, medium, large. So it's basically one size fits most, and you really cannot customize it too much. That's the reason why I only do 2 measurements: front to back and circumference. And as you can see, the wig head that I'm using is a 22-inch, so this is average. And if I were to get someone who had a larger size head, I would just use a larger size cap and a larger size wig head. So right here you can see that my lines are even, pretty much even. They're spaced equally apart on the side, and there's my space that's left for my closure, and the line that I made directly behind it that is going to be the space that I'm going to sew on that last track before I get to the closure. So I'm sewing on my first piece. You want to make sure, like I said before, that you back stitch when you begin, and make sure you back stitch when you end. I am using a zigzag stitch. Actually, I used a zigzag stitch when I sewed the tracks together, but however, while I'm sewing the tracks on to the cap, I decided to just use a single stitch. And you're just going to go ahead and cut the excess track hairs away, and then start on your next line, and you're going to measure that line on, you're going to measure that track on to that next line, and you're going to do that all the way up till you get to the top or to the crown. Now I will say the crown, excuse me, is going to be more challenging, and I found out it was even more so challenging because I decided to use this mesh wig cap, which was very constricting. There was not a lot of movement, and so I kind of struggled with trying to sew in that space. And I'll show you when I get to the top of the head what I had to do. And sometimes you're going to have to learn how to improvise, make it your own, do what you have to do to make the wig your own. You don't want to, like I said before, necessarily feel like you have to copy someone else's work exactly. So here you can see I'm halfway up the head, and I'm applying the other track on, and I'm getting to the part where it's starting to get really, really tight. And this part, I want you to make sure that you sew really slow. This video has been sped up, but I want you to sew really slow when you get to this area, because you don't want to have any hair that's stuck in between your sewing machine, and you just want everything to lay down smoothly. So take your time when you get to this area. If you have not already subscribe to this channel. Make sure you hit the notification bell. Make sure you share this video. Make sure you leave a comment or a question if you have a question. And make sure you hit that notification bell so you'll be notified when I have another video. My next video coming up is going to be how I styled and cut this inverted bob mullet wig. Yes, mullet inverted bob wig. And I'm going to show you how I did that on my next video. Make sure you stay tuned for that. As you can see, the struggle is real as I'm trying to maneuver around the crown area. This is the first time I've ever had this type of a struggle, and I would assume that it's because I'm using a new cap, and this cap does not have as much stretch to it, but I had to really take my time and work around this, and I did have to learn how to improvise so that I can make it work for me. So there we are. What I did is I sewed this piece on by hand. Yes, I sewed it on by hand, and now I'm going to reinforce it on the sewing machine. And it's okay if you have to sew the piece on, or some of the pieces on by hand. Just make sure you go back and reinforce it on the sewing machine, because like I said before, it depends on the cap and how much stretch it has. There are times when you may struggle to get it to maneuver the way you need to in order to sew it down flat. So do what you have to do, and just make sure you reinforce it on the sewing machine. So here I basically attached my closure in the part that I marked off. Make sure, like I said before, that you have like a 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch space beyond your cap, edge of your cap, so that the lace will lay down smooth. And my method of sewing on my closure is to start from the side, either the right or the left side. In this case, this is, I believe, the left side. And I'm going to go from the left front side, and I'm going to sew to the back middle, and I'm going to stop, tie a knot, and I'm going to move over to the other side. So I'm going to go side to side and end up in the middle. This always assures that I have a nice smooth laying frontal. So here I've moved over to the other side, and I am moving up towards the back, the center back, where I will complete the sewing of this closure. You want to make sure that you don't sew that last track on to the closure. It will make a gap in between. Just make sure that they are at least, I would say, 1/16 of an inch apart. And as you can see right now, I'm cutting away the excess cap so that we can expose the lace, and we are nearing the end of making this wig. Make sure you like, subscribe, make sure you share, hit the notification bell, and stay tuned for my next video on how I cut and styled this inverted bob mullet wig. And there you have it, a completed wig on the sewing machine. Woo, I'm tired. See you next time.